You're listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a podcast where we explore what it's like getting older, the peaks, the valleys, and everything in between. In this season of Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, we are covering topics related to vibrant aging. I'm your host, Cheryl Proska. Let's grow old together. On today's episode, I'm joined by Mike Liskai, Zemplee's Director of Program Operations, and my colleague, Beth Morley, a care coordinator with Friends Life Care. Mike is an experienced healthcare and business operations leader with a strong background in bringing innovative health tech solutions into the homes of older adults. At Zemplee, Mike oversees implementation, partnerships, and data-driven care workflows. His work bridges smart home sensor technology and real-world care coordination to promote independence, safety, and aging in place. Beth holds a Master's of Social Work degree and a Bachelor's degree in International Studies and has 25 years of experience in public and private positions with a background in case management systems, long-term care coordination, and program development. Mike and Beth, welcome and thank you for being here. How are you both today?
Great. Thanks for the invitation. Really looking forward to this.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. You're joining me today to discuss a clinical study where Zemplee's passive AI monitoring system was installed in some high-risk Friends Life Care members' homes. To get started, let's get into some introductions and learn a bit more about Zemplee. Mike, can you go ahead and tell us about Zemplee, its mission, and your role there?
Absolutely. So, Zemplee was actually created by our founder, Aparna Pujor, several years ago. She was living in California. Her parents were aging in place or trying to age in place back in India. And she was looking for a way to safely and securely keep them in their home. They did not want cameras. And Aparna's background is development. And she looked on the market for devices to kind of keep in their home, to keep an eye on them, so to speak. And there wasn't anything on the market. So she just went on herself and found some kind of off-the-shelf products, monitoring movements in their home. And she wrote the software to monitor if there were any changes. And that's kind of how it started. And so everything jumping forward, she left her then current job and started her own business. That's kind of how we got started. And that's still really the mission that sits behind Zemplee, is to keep people in their homes where they want to be, or their living environments, for as long as safely possible. That's still our mission going forward. My role, or my background's in healthcare. Grew up in clinical care, post-acute care, and hospital operations. And my role with Zemplee is program manager and also account management. Once the program or we have a new customer, I'm the interaction between the customer and Zemplee. So implement new programs, new installations, and maintain that relationship with our customers.
Well, thanks for helping us get to know about Zemplee and yourself a little bit better. Beth, can you share with the audience your role at Friends Life Care and how you became involved with this study Friends Life Care did with Zemplee?
Sure. I am one of 16 care coordinators. So as a team, our role is to work with our members from the time they join until they leave our membership, and to age independently where they want to be, and to try to help them meet their goals of vital aging along the way. Part of what we're doing is promoting wellness and optimal function as our members age. And with any interaction, we're meeting with our members at different intervals in their homes, sometimes in community settings, and we're constantly gathering data to inform the recommendations that we make to help our members age well and where they want to be. We're constantly collecting information from our annual visits, from the assessments that we use, from the information provided from our members, as well as from their loved ones and informal caregivers. And along that way, and part of what we've always done in Friends Life Care is constantly push the envelope forward as far as trying to always be on the forefront of interventions, evidence-based interventions that help people to meet their goals as they age. And part of that is we have a technology committee. And I'm part of that committee. And what we do in that committee is explore and research different opportunities to integrate technology into what we do. And so as part of this committee, Zemplee was identified. And after initial contacts, we were able to develop an agreement to participate in a pilot study with them.
So going maybe one step back, what would you say was the why behind this collaboration? Like, what was the problem that we were aiming to solve for the Friends Life Care members?
I think the why for us, and in any, the question is, can we improve our monitoring of members at risk who are maybe less likely to be able to give us accurate information or to utilize other existing technologies? We follow members from the time they join us, from the time they're well, often to the end of their lives. And along that way, we have members who will fall into at-risk categories, and for different reasons, number of comorbidities, number of illnesses that they have, and certain illnesses, including certain dementias and cognitive impairments, can increase risk and can also reduce sometimes the reliability of the information that we gather to make proper assessments and recommendations. And so what we were really aiming at was to try to fill that gap of information and knowledge, to try to, again, provide there are areas when working with individuals, there are times when you can't see every angle. So there are times like nighttime behaviors or certain behavioral patterns which might change that you're not going to pick up in a verbal assessment or even with physical observation. And so having certain pieces of data can really inform the decisions that we make.
Mike, is there anything that you want to add from Zemplee's perspective about the why behind this collaboration and how you started to help solve the problem Beth was laying out?
Yeah, I think Beth really hit the head of the nail there with being able to take data, take information, take data and turn it into decisions. And we needed, companies, organizations to help us prove that what we're anticipating to be the case with our data and how it can benefit care providers. We needed to prove that, and we needed a third party to help us do that. So we worked with a third party analytical company, and they helped kind of crunch the numbers and look at the data and prove what we were surmising about what our system can do.
So as I understand it, Zemplee is a at-home monitoring system. And I would love to hear more about like the nuts and bolts of Zemplee's technology and how it functions in someone's home. Can you take this one, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. As Beth said, it's passive. And what passive means is that the participant, the beneficiary, the aging adult in their home, they don't have to do anything. They just have to live their lives. And in fact, most all of our sensors, you don't even see, or they kind of blend into the background. So we use motion sensing technology or hardware. And then we also use contact sensing hardware that monitors people, their sleep patterns, or how much they're in their bed, how much they're in their chair, or refrigerator usage, medicine cabinet usage, bathroom usage. All that information is vitals. We consider activity as a vital sign. So if a professional were going into the home, say an occupational therapist or a physical therapist case manager and evaluating someone in their living environment, they would have to do that over, let's say, a half an hour, 45 minutes, and they would visually, use their senses to watch and observe an individual. Those are very beneficial. I mean, those have been going on for decades. However, once they leave, they don't see what else goes on. And so our technology, our hardware, software analyzes those movements throughout a 24/7. And the clinician, the care provider, can get a better assessment of what's going on in someone's home. So yeah, when we say passive, this type of hardware, software monitors people just passively. So they're not actually inputting data into anything about their activities during the day.
What's coming up for me is whenever I'm having someone come into my home, I'm always making sure that the house looks as good as I possibly can get it to. And I'm putting on that, that host persona. And I think that I would probably do the same thing, that if someone was coming in to give me an evaluation, I would be putting on my best foot forward. And then when the person leaves, it might be a bit different than when the occupational therapist, the nurse, whoever was coming in to help me. So the fact that you have the passive monitors, I wouldn't even know they were there because, it's not cameras or anything like that, that it would give that full picture of what might be going on in someone's life. So that I just wanted to give that perspective about that. That's what I'm feeling. And that's what I imagine both of you see in the results.
Absolutely. And Beth, I can't remember if it was you or Ellen or someone had mentioned one time that, they were asking somebody how they're sleeping at night. And they said, "Oh, I'm fine." And they went back and looked, they first looked at the platform and saw that they were getting up 2-4 times a night, right? But they're verbally reported that, yeah, I'm getting up, And often what we hear is once the care coordinator or the care provider says, "Well, actually, we're seeing that you get up a couple times a night. Anything you want to share about that?" And then they fess up that, "Oh, yeah, I'm not feeling that well," or "This is what actually is happening."
And there can be times when there's not a conscious effort to not disclose certain information, but with certain disease processes, can be a lack of insight, an actual neurological blinder that can prevent people from being able to maybe see some of the deficits that do exist. And nighttime behavior is, again, one of those big questions, nighttime and bathroom behavior, that cannot be answered that well subjectively. And that's where having this data becomes very critical.
Great points. And one other thing, if I might add, sometimes when you're dealing with something or when you're in the thick of a problem that you're dealing with, you can't see the forest through the trees. You're like, this is just the way it is. I've been dealing with this for so long. I'm fine. When really, if you have that data and you have someone who really knows what they're doing, they could help you and you could make improvements, whatever they may be, to help you live a more vital life, as Beth was mentioning earlier. I know something that can be a hang up for maybe anyone is people don't want cameras in their home. And when you start to think about, we're going to be passively monitoring you, sometimes that can still be scary. So I would be curious to hear what the members' reactions were about having the monitoring in their home and how you might recommend talking with an older adult about why this is privacy protected. This is something to help you, because I don't think people really want to be monitored.
Yeah,
I think that's still one of the biggest challenges to bringing any technology into the house. You have some people who are just averse to any technology. And then you have people who don't like the idea that they are being monitored and watched. Yeah. I think the fact that there are no cameras and that it is a passive technology is one selling point. I think that having supportive informal family system can make a big difference as well. So if there's positive reinforcement from all parties, it's easier to consider the option. I think the biggest surprise I found, especially with Zemplee, was how quickly my members really did forget that the technology was there. There were a couple of times where I had to come and check in on the sensors, and a couple of my members just had forgotten that we had put them in place because it didn't require them to do anything. It didn't set off any loud alarms at strange times. So they really adapted quite quickly to it.
Anything you want to add, Mike, either from the Friends Life Care study or with some of your other customers about, kind of how to get over that worry about having, monitoring in your home?
Yeah. And I think, even using the word technology can be, a negative in some demographics, it's, I kind of, having grown up in the healthcare world, I really kind of advise or discuss with our customers to use our technology, our services as healthcare tools. It helps them stay healthy. I think the other thing too is, even though it is passive, they're participating in their own care just by living in their homes. And I think the other thing too is we talked about earlier, like why were we seeking to work with FLC is, with the study and proving it, but now we get real life testimonials from not only the care providers, but also the participants. And so, I think as an aging adult, or not even an aging adult, everyone before they consume a product, they want to know others are using it and have benefited from it as well. So this has helped both of our organizations out going forward into the future.
You both gave a great example earlier about using the data that was provided through Zemplee to identify a Friends Life Care member who was, the sleep patterns weren't at a level that we would want them to be. Can you talk about how else that the data being collected is used, whether it gives an alert when something might be wrong, or if it does, give guidance of what we should be talking to people about? I just like to hear more about how you take the data and you turn it into helpful information for the individuals who are using the technology.
Yeah, from a platform perspective, I'll talk about that first, and then I'll let Beth kind of discuss the interaction part. But yeah, we do send alerts. So we're collecting data, yes, and so which is very beneficial from trending and predictability. But obviously, the biggest concern here with this population is false, right? So if movement or contact isn't sensed, and the organization can choose the amount of time that goes by before an alert is sent. So we do send alerts, notifications, alerts for things like no movement, or maybe there was no kitchen visit within a day, or the refrigerator wasn't opened, which would be a big reason to call somebody and find out what's going on. Those alerts can be sent to both the care provider or to the family. And we can talk about that in a little bit as well. So, the family can be involved in this care coordination as well. So we send alerts on various different parameters, and we're very flexible in how we do that for our customers, because each one's a little bit unique, in addition to the trending data and through reports and kind of what's been going on and what might be going on in the future.
Beth, do you want to pick it up from there about how you turn that into having thoughtful conversations with the members?
And with the system initially, and I think this is, again, a challenge with a passive monitoring system, but a hump one has to get over, is in the beginning, there are more alerts because the system is gathering data. And it takes some time to gather that information to create meaningful data and identify patterns. So initially, there were more alerts going out in general, just about daily patterns, and those settled down. Those alerts went both to family and to FLC care coordination staff. So if there were red alerts, any alert, denoting a particular concern, somebody wasn't getting out of the chair or out of bed, we would use that information to check in on the spot to make sure somebody was okay. As time went by and the data was picking up patterns, we were looking at that information on more of a weekly and a monthly basis, both looking at the individual member, but then as a team working on this, participating in the study, looking at what that data was telling us as a group about the group we were looking at. Also looking at areas where the data might be missing information, where there might be areas where there might have been some gray area between the sensors and question of whether we needed to move some sensors. There were also times where there would be some issues with the sensors and we would get an alert or notified that we needed to check in. So it did create more touch points between care coordination and the members participating by way of both phone calls and probably some additional home visit check-ins to make sure the system was working as it should and checking in based on any anomalies we saw through the data.
And that leads us into some more of the insights that we were able to glean from the study. It's my understanding that the study showed fewer hospital days and improved mobility and safety outcomes, despite this being individuals that were at a higher risk baseline. What would you both say drove those results?
Yeah, I think Beth kind of touched on it right here is, it's the people drove that. Even though our platform is there and our sensors are there, it was providing meaningful information, data that they turned into information and decisions. And so I think coming from the healthcare background that's what we're all looking for is, what's really going on, whether it's a blood test, an x-ray, a stress test, whatever it is, you're gathering data and you as a clinician provider, you're taking that data, turning it into information and decisions. And I think that's what drove the positive results of this case study. It still relies on people, but just using a different form of data to drive decisions.
And Beth talked about the fact that there were more touch points. We could see, very acute risks, but also patterns. Is there anything more, Beth, that you want to add that you saw as, wow, these were wins for our members, or any other memorable stories that you would want to share from your interactions in the pilot study?
I think two things that really stuck out to me from the data. One was the data about the identifying and preventing the UTIs, the urinary tract infections. I thought that was incredibly information in the sense that if you think about it, UTI is one risk factor that you're looking at, but in a way, by identifying and preventing or treating the UTIs, you identification of one major risk factor positively reduced 4+ other related risk factors. So when you have a UTI, there's always a risk that it was caused by dehydration or is also putting somebody at further risk of dehydration. There's a risk of fall. There's a risk of having to go to the ER, which puts an increased risk of a hospitalization. And then there's the risk of a change in mental status from not only just from the infection, the untreated infection, but from having to go through this process of having to sit in an emergency room for 8 hours and then be admitted to the hospital while they try to figure out what's going on, which could then result in deconditioning, which then may necessitate a skilled rehab stay. And so just by identifying that one risk factor, you greatly reduce all of these other risk factors, which have significant impact on long-term function for anybody who has to go through that kind of a situation. The other thing that stuck out to me, which was the increase in the participants' perception of their own safety, their home safety, the increase in their peace of mind, and the decrease in their anxiety levels. And research shows that there is a very direct correlation between how people feel about their health and their safety and their potential risk for falls and having some type of an incident which can interrupt their independence. So those two pieces stuck out to me and it wasn't, a very long study, but it really showed some demonstrable differences between the two groups.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit too is, I think it's worthwhile to note that FLC, we also have a relationship with Amazon, and so we use a special type of Alexa show device. It's the one with the screen. So here's an example of kind of what we put in individuals' homes as well, and the care staff can choose to interact with the aging adult in their home, the participant, and it really positively impacts, to Beth's point, it reduces social isolation and the attitude of the recipient that there's a person there caring for them, and they feel safe and secure. So that's another positive kind of passive device. You don't have to interact with it, but it's there for you. It's another care person in the home, so to speak. And so that's another aspect that, looking back, would have been an additional benefit of the relationship with FLC.
Would you prefer to age independently in your own home or live in a nursing facility? I know what I'd rather do. Friends Life Care membership offers just that. Plan today for a future lived at home with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience while protecting your savings. Learn about your options at a free seminar or webinar. Register at friendslifecare.org/register or call 215-628-8964. Welcome back to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, where today I'm joined by Mike Liskai and Beth Morley to discuss the positive impact Zemplee's passive AI monitoring system had with some high-risk Friends Life Care members. Before we move on, is there anything more either of you want to say about how the Friends Life Care members who were part of the studies or their families described the positive impact that they found that it had on them?
Beth, you want to take that?
Yeah, I think with my members, I think really did lose track of the fact that they were using the system. And I think that is a compliment in and of itself. They were not annoyed by it. They weren't we deal with different personal emergency response systems, and there's different degrees of readiness and willingness to use technology. I think the feedback across the board from families was increased peace of mind, which is really what loved ones, informal caregivers are looking for. They also want to know that their loved one has the highest degree of support and safety wherever they are.
And is there anything that either of you learned that surprised you? For example, I'm surprised that people forgot that the monitors were in their home, because that really surprised me. I didn't think that would be something that would happen. So was there anything about the study that surprised either of you?
I think the feedback from the care coordinators, from Beth and her colleagues, was tremendous. And we would meet every other week throughout the year, just about. And, things, they provided details that we just didn't think of as far as different features and benefits of the platform. So I was just pleasantly surprised as far as their feedback and willingness to help Zemplee progress and improve. So that was very gracious of them to be able to provide that. So really love that.
And I don't know as much as a surprise, but I guess I'm always a skeptic when we're trying out new technology. That's just the angle from where I'm coming from. And I always sort of try to play devil's advocate when looking for pitfalls and things like that. And I think what surprised me, I guess, in that regard is that we pretty quickly had patterns of data emerging, and they not only provided helpful information in terms of gaps of knowledge, but they also reinforced some things that we were seeing and assumptions and observations we were making about our own members. So I was pleasantly surprised at how quickly the data became very helpful to my ongoing assessment of the members with whom I work.
That might answer the next question I had. I do want to still pose it in case there's more to cover that I just wouldn't be aware of. Anything else you want to say about how Zemplee changed the way care coordination happened, or what you found was different during the clinical study? I do want to say that I know it led to more touch points, helping decrease the risk of falls, but anything else that we haven't covered?
No, I just think it gave us another tool to check in with members. It gave us, again, more information, and it allowed us to check in and gather information without increasing our own level of intrusiveness, because we have to balance the need for touch points and interaction with our members with sometimes they have not as much of a desire to see us. And so I think it really just, again, provided an opportunity to check and compare data in between other formal contexts, such as telephone calls and home visits.
Got it.
Yeah, I think it gave a reason for the phone call, right? It drove instead of just a general, which there's benefits to that, but you had a real solid data, objection with an objection behind it or objectionable, and be able to drive the conversation when you did call them as well. So I think the other part of what we're trying to accomplish here is efficiencies, so that if you're monitoring, say, 100 people from an FLC perspective, or say a home care agency perspective, you want your staff to know who of those 100 do I really need to focus on today, the most today. Not that you're not focusing on the other ones, but what's happening in their homes or their living environments that I really need to contact them today and follow up with them, and or share with their family or their care provider. So that's the other thing that we're trying to accomplish here, is that trending data from an aggregate perspective for the organizations.
And identify what specifically you need to talk with that person about, whether it's urgent. I haven't seen this person go to their refrigerator in a day, or I noticed that there might be a changing pattern. I'm curious what might be causing that. So that's very eye-opening to me. It really does shift who is leading that conversation, as you're saying. So that's very interesting to me. Did you find that the way that you were engaging with your members changed, Beth? Changed the way that you were talking to them and starting off conversations and posing questions?
As Mike said, it was a starting point for the conversation when you were checking in. And I think what it really guided to were conversations about future needs, which the people we were monitoring were people at risk, high risk of going into care. And it helped those conversations and also helped guide the recommendations that we make, because when you're talking about care, you're really trying to balance what people need with what they want in terms of support in their home. And nobody wants more than the minimal amount of support that they need. And so the data is very helpful to guide that conversation about what somebody needed, what was sufficient, whether there were gaps at different times of the day and the support that they had, or whether it just confirmed that they were stable and not in need of increasing the formal support inside the home.
And speaking of balance, I'd be curious to hear how you both approach this balance between like their technology, and then there's also human touch, whether it's in care coordination or healthcare in general, or aging services. So really the question is, how do you approach the balance between technology and the human side of care?
Well, I'll start because I'm a real example. We have our system in my father's home, and so he's 80, and he lives by himself. He's very mobile, and drives, and he's very, very physically active. In fact, I wish he'd stay home more. But he's kind of our guinea pig. But at the same time, he's also my father, and the balance is I'm not calling him, a week every week, and just to talk about what I'm seeing his patterns are. I'm only having a conversation with him if something seems amiss. If he didn't open his refrigerator, or he slept in longer than he normally does. In fact, one time I got an alert because he was still in bed. He usually wakes up at 7:30, 7:45. And he checks in on our device at 8:30 every day, hits the button, and he likes that. But he was still in bed. It was about 9:30, and I got an alert notification. So I called him, and he was very sick. But he wasn't going to call me. Because they want to maintain their independence, although I could help him. And there's a balance between, not to remind somebody that they're being monitored, but only call out the times that really, from a healthcare clinical perspective, that really need interaction.
And I would say from the care coordination team, when we're looking at technology, we're always holding the value that technology should supplement and not supplant what we are doing. It shouldn't replace human contact. It shouldn't replace care if it's needed, but it can serve as a bridge between total independence and care in the home. And there is this gray area time where people who are at risk need support, but still want to be on their own. And this allows for more room for that, while also providing the safety and the supervision necessary to make sure we're not missing big variables that could interfere with these goals, person's goals. How do you
Assess what technology could be a fit for the members?
I mean, it's going to vary according to their need and readiness. You cannot underestimate the concept of readiness when working with individuals. And that readiness is related to the willingness to accept and use any recommendation, and technology is just another tool, another recommendation, another intervention. But you also have to think of it. So first of all is readiness and willingness, but then there's technical and financial feasibility. Person has to be able to use the technology. They have to have an environment able to set the technology up properly, and they have to be able to manage it, whether that's charging a piece of technology or willingness to use it. You can have a personal emergency response system that does no good if the person is not willing to wear the pendant. And so it's really ongoing conversations with our members and their families, and there's a great variability. Some people embrace technology, want to test everything. Others really don't want it in their homes. So it's sort of a constant assessment and negotiation.
In your experience, what technologies have you found that most older adults would be more receptive to, and which ones they tend to be more resistant to?
Sorry. I think cameras are a big turnoff. People, if they're being watched, that is an immediate turnoff to people. I have also found that, with the personal emergency response systems, for people who are not forgetting to use them, the complaints I get are the false alarms. If they're set off accidentally, that can be very disruptive and embarrassing. And sometimes it's just a tactile thing. They don't want to wear something around their neck or around their wrist. It's uncomfortable. It's irritating. They don't want to wear it all the time. When yet the research shows, the most frequently occurring time when people fall is 3:00 in the morning. So that's the most important time to be using such equipment. But I think it's anything where somebody feels like they're being spied on, or where they feel like they're going to be interrupted unexpectedly. That's anecdotally the feedback I receive.
Beth's spot on, and that's the reason why we exist, is because if you recall, our founder, her parents didn't want cameras. That was the only thing that really they said. And so, that's still true today. And it, I think the initial resistance is more about independence. I think that's what's driving most of it. I think that reason gets superseded by knowing, once they understand that, like I said before, this technology or this hardware is it's a healthcare tool, and it will allow them to stay in their home. I think that's the driving force behind it. Is everyone wants to be in their home, and they don't want to move. That's stressful and strain. It puts a lot of strain, and they know that. So I think that's what probably turns the decision for most people, once they kind of wrap their brain around that, and their families want them to stay in their home as well. So I think that collaboration between the aging adult and the family is really important and drives the decision to embrace technology.
Mike, where would you say Zemplee's headed next? Any innovations on the horizon?
Oh, every day. Our development team is nonstop, because, what we get feedback from people like Beth and the FLC team on how to get better, which we want all the time. But specifically, the sensors are getting more detailed. Today, it's using heat signatures for the motion sensors. In the future, they'll be able to provide their care coordinators more detail regarding if there's multiple people in the home, maybe even being able to discern between person A and person B, looking at their speed a little bit more. In fact, that was a conversation we had during a meeting with FLC. Someone had mentioned that, maybe speed of movement or length of time in a particular room or things like that could drive healthcare decisions as well. So that's coming. So improved technology, the hardware, and how it works. The other thing too is being able to interpret subjectively the hard data. So we've just released an AI tool that looks at all those motions and movements and contacts and activity in the home and creates a narrative around what that data is showing. So it's almost like a note in a EMR tool that happened the previous day. Now today it just stands at looking at the previous day, but as we grow, it'll look at multiple days, multiple months, and then we have a chat bot in our application as well. So someone like Beth could go in and say, Zemplee, please tell me how Cheryl's bathroom visits have changed over the last year. And just like we're used to using ChatGPT. Our tool will be able to give that answer to the clinician about those changes, so that they don't have to go look through spreadsheets and data sets and graphs and all that kind of thing. It will just tell them what is actually going on in a narrative. So those are just a few of the things that we're working on.
Beth, how do you see care coordination evolving as technology becomes more integrated?
I think currently we're always using technology as another intervention in our toolkit. So we're on a micro level now recommending to our members different personal emergency response systems for fall detection, medication management systems, home safety monitoring technology. And I think really the overall future goal is really the successful integration of all these various technology interventions to really reduce redundancies, to improve efficiency, and that result in improvements in physical and psychosocial functioning, but also do allow people to remain in the home independently longer than they would without the technology. And to me, a unified technology system that addresses all of those vulnerable points is sort of the holy grail down the road.
We're getting to the end of the conversation, and I just want to give you both an opportunity, if you have, one or two takeaways that you really want most listeners to remember about the role of technology as we age.
Yeah, I guess, it depends on, who's listening. I guess from a healthcare organization perspective is, I think the message we want to be able to share is, these are tools that your customers really are expecting you to integrate within your processes today. Yeah, sure, there's going to be some, hesitation and resistance from some, but I think, it's the same as if you went back 100 years or 200 years and you gave someone a blood pressure cuff, a clinician, and they would look at it like, why would I want to use one of those, right? It's really part of our lives, and it's going to improve care and efficiencies. From a aging adult perspective, like we've said before, I think to know that you have the safety and security to stay in your home, not just stay in your home, but stay in your home safely, I think is the important thing. And same with the family, that, here's a tool, it's passive, and it will help you take care of mom or dad without as much stress and strain on your lives. Because, this sandwich generation, between they have people still have kids maybe in their late teens, early 20s in their lives, they're still involved in them. And then they have mom or dad in the home that they're taking care of as well. So I think having some tools, practical tools to help them with their lives is equally important.
I agree with Mike. I think the concept of technology as an intervention, as a tool, I think it's important when working with people as they age, for ourselves as we're all aging. It's important to reframe how we conceptualize aging to include the use of tools as we need them. There's often resistance to not just technology, but durable medical equipment and the things that can make life easier. I have a colleague who really talks about the importance of staying sort of two steps ahead of ourselves and our planning and assessment of our needs. And I think part of that is looking at technology, again, as just one of the tools in the tool belt that is vital for maintaining independence. It's not taking anything away. It can be critical for reaching the goals that we all have.
In closing, Mike, where can people go to learn more about Zemplee?
Yeah, so Zemplee.com, so our website. And then in addition, on our website, we have our white papers that we've published over the years. We also have a YouTube channel, and we're just starting our own podcast as well. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, LinkedIn for business professionals, Facebook, all the social media platforms to learn about us.
I'll link all that in today's show notes. And we also referenced the pilot study and the results between Zemplee and Friends Life Care. I'll link that in the show notes in case anybody would be interested in reading that. And I want to thank you both so much for joining me today and sharing the success of Zemplee's passive AI monitoring system with some of Friends Life Care's high-risk members. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Honestly Aging by Friends Life Care VigR, a unique program focused on aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience. You can find links and show notes from this episode on our website at friendslifecare.org/podcast. Thank you to Mike Liskai and Beth Morley for joining us today. You can learn more about Mike, Beth, Zemplee, and Friends Life Care by visiting zemplee.com, friendslifecare.org, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram. If you like our show, please rate, review, subscribe, and join us next time. To learn more about aging with vitality, independence, growth, and resilience, subscribe to our blog at friendslifecare.org/blog.